All right, beautiful humans, welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I'm your host, Caleb Nelson, and I have my new friend, Dr. Rob Bell, on the podcast today. I'm so excited to have you on. Thank you, Rob, for coming to the show today.
Absolutely, man. I enjoyed the time we connected and look forward to it, brother.
Hey, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I mean, I've got the book right here, Puke Rally, next to me. Thank you, by the way. And of course, I get all excited. I start knocking my computer around. Sent me the book. I've opened it a little bit, checked out a couple things already within that. I listened to your podcast. I love that too. But I like to start off every episode with why I appreciate my guest, namely because I think we need to start telling each other why we value each other in this world a little more. I don't know. Call me crazy, but I think that might be the start to world peace. I don't know. We never know. We'll see where it goes. But I got to say, from our first conversation, I don't even remember who connected us. That's how where it's gone from this. I think the best things, but like, I love your perspective. I love the questions you ask. And I'm really at a place in my life right now where I don't want to say judge a person by this, but like I feel like I have better insight into a person by what type of questions they ask. Are they curious? Are they open-minded? And you like, we were just doing a little meet and greet, and just like some of the questions and the topics you love to talk about, like time. One of the things you just ask, like my opinion of what do you think about time?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I love having my mind stretched like that. I love being challenged to think deeply. And that really speaks to me, like high character, high value. We just had a conversation before this about like some of the experiences you're going on with your family. I love the notion of what this book is all about, Puke and Rally, but like overcoming adversity. How does that not connect with people in this world? And so many people just see adversity as a bad thing. And with all some of the episodes I listened to on your podcast, it's like it's this opportunity to grow as a person. So I really admire and appreciate anybody who takes that on, especially some of the things you've like pivoted and grown through in your life. I appreciate it because I think we need to share more of those insights, and it helps inspire people who are going through a challenging time. So I just want to say thank you for that. Like, I've been so excited for this episode, and
Nice, man.
like I said, welcome to the show, man.
I like that idea, man. We should start telling people what it is that we appreciate about it, what we appreciate of them. That's a great idea there. One nugget number one, man.
Nugget number one to start it off. I mean, take it and run with it, my friend. It's not mine to hold on to. It's almost my subtle way of paying it forward, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So let's go right into it. Like, you know yourself better than I do. So Rob, who are you?
Nice. Always the easy question to start, right?
That's why I ask it.
Yeah. You know, I knew early on, like in my life, what it was that I wanted to do. And I always felt kind of blessed in that kind of situation. So, I mean, it was through adversity that I came to, discover sports psychology and mental coaching. And that's what I wanted to do with my life. And um, I've never DNF'd from a race. I've always finished everything that I started. And so like when that was sort of tattooed in my heart that this is what I'm going to do with my life, and I can always get into that story.
Yeah.
I always felt that was that removed a lot of the ambiguity, I think, when it came to like, well, what is it that I'm going to do like in life? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, with having ambiguity. I think that's a good spot to be in sometimes. So it was a matter of being able to find the path and make the path that I was supposed to do. And that was the part that was always, it was always frustrating. It was always difficult. And I mean, always, there were many months, man, to start my own career where it was like, don't know if we're going to make it. I kind of set like a pretty low limit, like in terms of like finances that you got to make. I don't know if we're going to make it, but I tell you what, man, every month got a speaking engagement, you got a new client. And then when, you do good work and you try to do good work and help people out, I always believed, again, sort of that Wayne Dyer thing, that if you help enough people reach their goals, you're going to reach yours. Or maybe that was Zig Ziglar was one of them. And I've always believed in that. And I think, the shape of my why now, that's the interesting thing about our why, is our why changes. My why about doing what I do right now is certainly not the same thing what it was 10 years ago. It wasn't what it was maybe 3 years ago. But that's a long way of saying, a mental coach, sports psychology coach. and I'm a product of the product. I think that's probably the most rewarding part and the most difficult part at the same time. It's not like I can post a video, which I don't, I do sometimes, but it's not like I can write a blog post or post a video and then, go back to the day job or something like that. I mean, it's being all in. And I always think, look, you're all in or you're in the way, one way or another. Most important job for me is obviously being, a good father and a good husband. Those are the most rewarding and I think the most difficult relationships that you got. And I was someone that I always struggled with relationships in one way or another. And that's always been like a challenge, probably the last, 20 years, man, been working on that. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it's like, it comes to who I am, I think that's probably a good way to start.
Take me on, like, obviously we have a lot of relationship people we have a lot of couples that listen to this, and I work with a lot of couples. We've talked about that. I didn't know that you struggle with relationships. Could you share a little bit about that? Share a little insight there.
Yeah, I'd rather not.
Well, whatever you feel comfortable. If there's like
No.
realms we can't, it's okay.
And it's difficult. Like, I was kind of embarrassed. I went back, and this was many years ago, probably 20 years ago. I went back and looked at, my mom was the one that would save like your kindergarten report cards, first grade report cards. And every one of them said the same thing, man. It said needs to get along better with others. And I hated that, because I was like, it was part of, the same thing. What happens when we grow up, what's the message that you get? Well, the message that I got was, if you need other people, you're going to get let down and going to get hurt. So don't need anybody and you're not going to get hurt. And so that, just slowly, right? That's sort of the message you start telling yourself. And if things aren't going well, you just work harder. That was basically it. And that works until it doesn't work. And so relationships, man, never worked on them, never dated. Well, I would date, like I would have girlfriends, but it wasn't anything. If it got serious, that wasn't anything that I wanted to be a part of. And so it was always just moving on, experiencing life and having fun, and people are coming along for it. Great. And then, and later, then when you try to develop relationships, I always think now, like, relationships get deeper or they die, and they would only just get so deep. I just would only let them get so deep. Wow. Because I didn't want to get hurt. That was basically it, man. I didn't want to need somebody enough that they could hurt me if I needed them and they weren't going to be around. So that was basically it. And I think that was why the struggle was always difficult. And so I always think then, look, if you struggle with relationships, you struggle with the relationship with yourself then too. And the most important relationships, I think, are inside the four walls, of our home. But that, I'm fine to unpack that, but I think that was kind of where the relationship piece was difficult.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because so much of that echoes deeply with me. I even just had a little post recently of like, happiness starts at home. And I agree with that. It's like, I think not enough people look at the home as like a training ground. Again, sports psychology, we're thinking about a training. How do you prepare yourself for this world? What an interesting perspective. If you have to rely on somebody, if you let somebody in, like, they can hurt you, and like, just do it by yourself, they can let you down. I love that little tweak you said. That works until it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a moment where you're like, hey, like, this is no longer, like, I'm banging my head against a wall? And then you just said, like, I have to pivot here. And I'm curious, like, was it with your wife, and was it with the family? Were those some of like the big turning points that helped tweak that? Because I know in my own life, like, as all great stories, there was a girl. Usually it's like, it's my wife.
Right.
To me, and I apologize for me just jumping in a little bit, but like, for me, for whatever reason, I felt safe enough being just myself. And then that led to wherever it's led to. So I'm just always really curious, like, what are some of these inflection points for people?
The easiest relationships, I think, is like the father to child, because you can just kind of like love on them one way or another. And it's easier just to kind of like love on them. I think that's why we love our pets so much too, right? Because like you don't expect much from the pet. Pet's going to be there, it's going to love you right back. Even if it's a cat, cat's still going to let you pet it at some point, right? If you have a cat that's never around, I guess you kind of love those, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, so, but the reciprocity that you need from, your significant others, man, your partners and your friendships, you need to be available for there. And it's not like, man, I was always the person, man, that had tons of acquaintances, man, very few deep relationships.
Wow.
I would have them, but there was always, it was just always at arm's length. And there wasn't really a moment that I said, boy, Rob, you really need to work on this. It was just evolved over time. And the story that we kind of tell ourselves, like, along the way. And that was just something, man, I've always, because what would happen too, Caleb, was like develop a relationship deep with somebody and they don't get hurt, but then they're not there anymore. Then they graduated and they moved on. And that was always a sadness from that piece too. People moving on with their life, there was always that sadness. And I didn't like sadness. That was a feeling I didn't really, equate well with, because of nothing I could do with that. I'd rather be angry than sad. And it was that sadness piece. Whereas if you keep people at arm's length, you're never going to get that close to where you're really going to be let down and you can't keep going forward and moving on, but again, it wasn't really a Hinge moment with that. It just came to evolve that this is something, and this is a piece that is constantly going to be working on.
Wow. I just admire bringing this into the conversation. I had no anticipation of this where we started today's conversation, but I don't think enough people give enough time to this thought. Like we talk, relationship, family, but like so many people get lost in their professional pursuits and the exterior stuff and forget that this is really, really powerful things. And it has it bleeds into the rest of your life, especially if you work in sports psychology. Like, oh, why is it going to matter if I'm at home? Like I got to have my training. I got to eat this, that, and the other thing. And, sleep X amount of hours a night. Like, why do I need to focus on this? It seems so foreign to people. I know that sports psychology is really coming into the forefront of like the social consciousness now. It was kind of like taboo a little bit for a while, but now it's starting to become more of a more accepted thing. Are you like, I guess in your own practice, are you seeing like this kind of conversation happens more than I'm curious. I have no idea because I'm not practicing.
It's a question that I ask a lot of my clients, man, is what's the level and depth of the relationships that you have? Like, how are the relationships? Because I'll have some that say, what relationships?
Wow.
And I don't think it's like, it's not as good or it's bad, but I identify with that because I totally get it, man.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot easier to keep your head down, focus on what you're trying to do than it is to be empathetic. Because look, I don't want anybody, and I always hated this too. It was like, I don't want anybody to reach out and be like, hey man, I'm worried about you. Like I never related to that stuff. That just wasn't me. There's some people, I just hate victimization at all, so it's like, that piece though of like, how are the depths of relationships and who are the closest people? How do you spend your time? How do you spend your money? How do you spend your relationships? And where does that come into play? Because I think that's the part that just feeds the soul, and it goes way beyond what our performance is going to be. And what's proof of that is any coach who always gets done, any athlete who always gets done with their career, what do they talk about? Talk about the locker room, the bus rides, and the relationships. Well, there's something to that. Then if every single one of them are always talking about that, and that's what the best memories are, how are we actively working on that then in our lives?
Yeah, especially if we're thinking about it from people keep it like so their relationships so like, I'm going to say myopically focused. It has to be all in one arena. If they don't have like, well, what does the home look like? Like, well, what if most people are going to go on to another career if they're a professional athlete in some way, shape, or form. Or, I mean, I can think of my own transition from high school athlete, or, it's an identity shift to say like, okay, this is not part of what I identify like my life as. I want to keep some of that health practice, the fitness or whatever it is, but I also want to keep like the camaraderie piece. If you've never practiced like stretching that and like what is it at its root, I can see why so many people, I know I struggled. I was like, why should I work out today? Or what? I'm not getting ready for a game or a practice or whatever. It's so my physical health went, but then also like that missing, that longing to be around people, which then also leads me to, you brought up the why. And what I really loved on your podcast, how did you say it? Your why makes you cry. That one clicked for me. I don't know why, just like it hit. And by the way, I love the episode I listened to because you had somebody flip it. I think it was your friend or your colleague.
Talk about the 100-miler.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that you flipped it on yourself, because I think there's a real like powerful vulnerability. And I'm like, here, like you can grill me from that perspective, like on my own show. I think that was really cool. But I was just having a conversation with my best friend the other day about the why. And what I liked how you said it is that yours changed over time, because I think a lot of people, and don't get me wrong, I've loved Simon Sinek's work and all that type of stuff, like start with why. But sometimes people get so caught up on that's my thing, that's the only thing, as opposed to like, well, what if you grow and you change and you adapt and you like, you can pivot, you can make a change. You don't have to be stuck because maybe you have new information, maybe you realize something new that really drives you. I thought that was really cool, especially as we're talking about this in the context of relationships. I gotta imagine as you became a father or husband, father, building your practice, the things like, there's probably still a vein of like, I love helping people, love taking care of people, help inspiring people, helping all that. But some of the motivations have to definitely, I'm maybe correct me if I'm wrong, have shifted a little bit within that. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure, man. And like I said, I mean, your why has to make you cry. If it doesn't, it's not your why. It's not deep enough. And I think your why goes probably 3-4 levels deep. And if you really look back to it, the motivation, it's either love or fear. Fear is a powerful driver, man. Very powerful. What's underneath fear? And that's what I kind of said earlier, well, anger is underneath fear. And that's just kind of the flagship of it. Well, anger, man, you can use that. I mean, if you look at like Ray Lewis's career, Ray Lewis, played with anger, grew up with anger, and made it work till it doesn't work anymore. Then you're kind of left with that void, because there's always that alter ego that you have to use, like when you're playing or performing, and then who you really are. So the why now always gets back to my kids one way or another. And what's interesting is that they teach me more about myself than I think I ever teach them. That's always the fascinating thing. I think that's the juxtaposition in life.
Wow.
Is whenever we help out somebody else, we're also helping out ourselves. And that's probably the piece where last few years, it's just been on with the whole mentality of who is it I'm going to be able to help, and how am I going to be able to help. And even in racing and performance context, that whole shift then changes, because then it doesn't allow me to get stuck inside my own head. It allows me to focus on other people. The only why that I've ever come across that has been detrimental, and depending on the level of it, it could be, toxic, is I'm good at it. Why do you do that? Well, I'm good at it. If the only reason why you're doing it, or the main reason why you're doing it, is you're good at it, it's not going to be enough to sustain you through the really difficult times. And it's not going to, it's just not going to have enough credence to it that's going to propel you and keep you going. Because the only reason why you're good at it, well, at some level, everyone's good at it. And then you start looking around now, you start questioning yourself about, oh, am I even really good at it? I always say this, like, if you're going to be good at something and hate it, like, be good at math, right? I mean, that's just me, man. Don't be good at sport and hate it.
Yeah.
because then you're trapped, right? You're entrapped because your whole identity is wrapped up in it. You're good at something, so you get the accolades for it too. That's the difficult part.
Mm.
You can get the accolades for being an asshole out there and performing really well. Well, that just feeds the beast. That does not help you out with your why and where do you really get the joy out of it. And that's the only detrimental why that I think I've come across in all my years in talking with athletes. I think it can be anything else. It's just, you just got to know what it is that works for you.
I'm curious, like, I'd go out on a limb and I guess postulate that that's far more common what people go with anyway. I'm good at it, so I'll just go with it. You brought up it can be toxic. Like, well, I mean, plus like hating something, like you're gonna go about your life like hating. How I think about it, especially if it's a job. How are you gonna hate what a third of your day, if not more, and way more of your waking hours? Like hating your life.
Yeah.
That just like a little part of my heart hurts when I think of that for somebody else.
But then that's the part. I mean, can't you relate to like how it works though? It's like someone asked me one time, like, what happens if you have a bad workout? And it was kind of foreign to me. I was like, what do you mean have a bad workout? Like, obviously, if there's going to be a bad workout, it's still going to be better than not doing it every time, and I'm not one of those people that, what people that know me or listen, I'm not one of those people that really work out when I am injured. Like I just don't go that far. I think, it depends on how close we are to something, but with people that ask, then it's like, sorry about that, man.
All good.
Do you ever have a bad workout? And the answer is no, because you just kind of get angry and push yourself through it. So it works. Hating yourself to success, that's just a real problem though, because it's like there's no off switch. And like you said, man, then it's that anger leaves a residue and it has to find an outlet some way, someplace. And that's the part where it just doesn't fly, man. So and there's always sort of this love-hate relationship with what people are doing. So I always say, like, anger directed outward is focus. The problem is anger directed inward, becomes depression.
I feel like almost every entrepreneur listening to this right now in some way, shape, or form has felt that. Like, that's heavy. That's really, really heavy. But I think it's powerful what you're bringing up here with anger. It's just an emotion. I mean, it's a thing. It's a feeling. I know myself, and I'll openly put myself in the chopping block. I struggled with anger stuff, like wouldn't deal with feeling stuff or just like avoided it. And for a long time, I was afraid to utilize it as a tool. Like you said, like anger, it can be used very powerfully, but also knowing how to use it. Who is it? I think it's Peterson who alluded to it. I've seen it on a couple of shows, but like there's I think it's like a Chinese proverb or something that's like, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war. And it's about kind of the idea about this is learning how to develop this skill set of being like monstrous, even like lethal even, but then understanding when and how to control it. And correct me if I'm way off here, it sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, hey, there's this thing called anger. This is a feeling. How we're going to channel this, or how we're going to utilize this tool that's in our arsenal is going to be very important, because unregulated, like you're saying, like you turn it inward. I mean, that is lethal. You're just like, it's like self-suicide by emotional bereavement. My mind went in like three directions there, so I'm kind of like trying to reel my thoughts back into it.
I always think that's the toughest part about the podcast too, man. It's like you hear something from your guests and try to process and then be able to ask the next right question, right? It's tough, man.
Well, that's why I love this format, because I wish more people challenge themselves to be a host of a podcast because for me, I love having, you said it beautifully a second ago, like my kids taught me more than I would ever, like even in coaching. I had a coach, she said, when you're ready to learn, start to teach.
Mhm.
And everything about that, the way you just said it, the way she said it, I was like, that hits. Podcasting often to me is like, well, I'm hosting a space. It's almost like I won't say it's an authoritative role, but like I'm hosting a space. I love having my thoughts challenged. I think there's something really beautiful in that. And like, I'm good with it. I mean, I call it Naked Sunday for a reason. Like I'm being just as vulnerable here. Like, I don't know the answers. I'm curious. Like, and I might look like an idiot for a few minutes. And I think that's really, I mean, I love when the phones go off. I love all this stuff because we're human beings just going through about our lives. And we happen to be having a conversation that we push record on. Um, I think there's a lot of beauty in all of that. I wish we would all engage in more of this long form thing where it can get a little messy. It can get a little sloppy. It can be unscripted. And I think that's where the beauty is because we can kind of like meet each other, understand each other. Like I didn't know about some of those, again, some of that relationship stuff contextualized to myself. Like I heard like the bones of it. I'm like, well, that sounds a lot like me,
Mhm.
especially athletes. I think there's a really interesting thing in where athletics have gone because I was a strength and conditioning coach for a college soccer team in the area, St. Rose. Really unique to see where athletics has gone. I don't see as much people using the tool of athletics of a sport to say, we're going to teach life skills. It's here's the trophy, got to win, that kind of thing. Not how do we collaborate? How do we deal with loss? I was just having that conversation yesterday. If everybody gets a trophy, like how do you know how to deal with failure? How do you
Mhm.
know? And that's, of course, I really want to lead in because you mentioned like sharing a little bit about adversity here. Like, how do we grapple with adversity if we've never been dosed this appropriately earlier on in life? You're going to have a letdown. Okay. But doesn't, especially when we talk about identity, like that doesn't mean you are a failure. It means you experienced something that didn't meet whatever expectation or whatever it is. How do
Right.
you recover from that? So if you mind just sharing a little bit about where this concept around dealing with adversity came for you and many motivations through it. Yeah.
Um, well, the biggest thing was it's a lot to it, man. I always struggled, obviously, with failure,
Hmm.
because I was one that would personalize it and take it with me. And I was amazed at the people that never took it with them. Like,
Hmm.
how do you do that? Because if I lost, like we lost. You bring up the participant trophy. It's funny, man, because it's like participant trophies have very little to do with kids. They have to do with the adults. They really do. And I don't just mean the adults for their kids. I meant for them with themselves. How many people are doing a Disney run just to get the medal that they can post? And I get it, man. There's some to that, but it's like that's participant medal. And when we're talking about everyone's really they just got the participant medal. There are very, very few people that can win age group at a big marathon, and even less people that can compete to try and win that. Um, you're talking about the best of the best. But who is it that and I'm sorry for the tangent, but who is
It's
it
okay.
that everybody will bring up as a reference point to success? So I challenge like the listeners right now, like think of your field or wherever it is, or the whole world. Who do you think of that's going to be success, right? And chances are people are going to mention the same people, right? I'll just, Richard Branson, Elon Musk. Let's go sports wise, right? Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, and those are just the ones that pop in my head real quick, right?
The same ones came up for me. That's why I'm
Yeah, man.
laughing.
So do some more thinking, and then there's going to be, you know, um, you're not using the right reference point, okay? Because you're using Einstein, right? You're using Sir Isaac Newton as your example, and that's the model that you should use, right? You're saying Galileo, that you're as smart as Galileo, like you can do that. Jeff Bezos. Well, look what Jeff Bezos did. It's just not the right model to use. You have to use somebody that's been successful, but that also I think has time and has the has what it is that you want. that's going to be somebody that's still successful, but not somebody that's Galileo, you know? And the reason why I don't know why I bring that up, man, because it's just one thing that's always on my head. If people are talking about examples, they're going to rip off the biggest ones. Not going to rip off, and part of it is because we all know who that person is, but we're not going to mention somebody who's been super successful that you just might not know of, because there's no credence like to using that example. And so I totally forgot like what the main question was, but it's like,
Okay.
I think of that as we're starting with the wrong example to begin with, so you got to find the model of what the ideal life kind of looks like, and where's the 100% devotion and showing up with your heart, but also having the life it is that you want. Because I think we just have the wrong model of what it is that we're looking for when it comes to success and what it kind of looks like. No one out there can repeat what Tiger Woods did in his career. There's a wonderkin right now out there who, in 15 years, you're going to know who it is, but it's still going to be a different journey than what Tiger had. But we use Tiger as the example for how you need to raise your kid and how it is that you need to bring it up. But it does not work, man. And there's a whole show about it, why it doesn't work and what the evil was sort of around it.
I think that's such an important conversation you're bringing. You're using the wrong model. And I'll contextualize what I hear in that, an example that worked really well for me around this. And this was a couple months ago. He's a friend of mine. I consider him a mentor in many ways, but I was at a retreat and somebody was asking about, it's like, they're like, well, what do you think about this guy and this guy? And he's like, like I've learned some lessons from them. I learned some lessons from that. But I think, and then he paused, he goes, but I think the more important question to ask yourself, let's use Elon Musk because he's in the news all the time anyway.
Right.
Yeah, Elon Musk has all that money, but do you want his life? And when he asked that, you could just see everybody go, oh yeah, I get it now. Like, are you willing to have all those things the way he lives his life? Does that mean something to you? Or do you want to have a different lifestyle than him? Because most people are not contextualized. They want the money or the external, whatever's being marketed or pitched as the idea of success, as opposed to look at the whole, look at the aggregate. What are his relationships like? I mean, he's had public divorces. He's had all these other things and nothing against him. I don't know him from the guy down the street. No idea. And he might be, and I wish him the best and happiness and all those things, but I don't necessarily want, and I love a lot of stuff he's doing, but doesn't necessarily mean I want his life. And I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't take that money at the trade-off. So I thought you brought up there was really powerful. Like, okay, these are the markers of success for that very hyper-focused thing. And yes, it happened to have that trophy associated with it. There was an emblem of what says you're successful in that specific field. But maybe if we're using a different model, like what would we quantify or qualify as a trophy in your life that doesn't necessarily, you're not waiting for some tournament or some other race or some and maybe it is a race. I don't know. Like, hey, I got the t-shirt because I ran the Disney run and I'm happy, but I don't need to post it all over social media, because I'm just happy anyway. Like, I just showing up was winning and I'm cool with it. And if I won for it, cool, I'm also cool with it. I thought that was a really important thing. You probably we're using the wrong model. But then where it started from was also with adversity. We're saying we're also not teaching people how to grapple with adversity. I think that I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. I was actually having a conversation just walking. Yeah. We did a networking meeting and we were just walking the park right behind me. And one of the women was sharing a story about her friend. Oh, maybe it was her daughter. Her daughter was really good in school. And then apparently her teacher gave her a B instead of an A. She was getting straight A's. And she said, I purposely gave her a B because somebody like this needs to learn how to deal with not getting an A and recovering from it. Now, if she deserved the A, you give her the A, but I thought that the concept that the teacher was maybe bringing to the table was actually really powerful.
Right.
Because everybody nowadays is well, don't tell, Johnny that they didn't I think there's so much fear around giving honest feedback.
Right.
opening a real, like a distinct conversation around like, hey, this is an area for improvement because I do genuinely care about you. So I guess this opens the
Yeah.
conversation to adversity. I'm
No,
curious.
and it's great, man, because there's so many different, avenues to it, right? I think one of the best things we can do, especially with those that we care about, is, that's where I think it's not a one-time conversation, but it's, I will be honest with you. Like the one thing that we do, I will be honest with you. Who really wants that, right? Do you really want the honest feedback? If people say yes, they really don't, right? They don't. Just say it's great and you loved it.
Yeah.
That's it. People really don't want that because we put our heart and a soul into something. You want to tell me it's not that good? It is the way that we get better, of course, but not many people want that. So I think it's like knowing that you are going to get the honest truth is very, very powerful. And that's where, with my career, man, it comes into play. I tell my athletes that I will be 100% honest with you, from my opinion. I could be wrong, but it's going to let you know what I see. And, that's a lot of vulnerability with that. And that gets you fired. It does. But my job's to work myself out of a job. That's why it also pays well too, because I'm not going to be giving you honest advice for free. Right. I mean, it's like, I'm not going to put myself out there because now you're just mad at me. And then that just doesn't work. Right. I don't want to be hated just because I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
But I look at like that adversity piece because there's the part where I kind of got into it is I never liked the cliche of fall down 7, get up 8. The reason why I didn't like that one is because I just never saw anybody that fell down and like just didn't get back up. Right. I've always heard like when somebody say that person's really a grinder, that person really fights out there. And you're talking about a sporting context. And the reason why I like sports so much and why I use athletics is because I spoke about ambiguity before. There's no ambiguity when it comes to athletics. At least there shouldn't be. You make the shot or you don't, right? You run the time, you swim the time, or you don't. And when there becomes ambiguity in sports, that's when it becomes really, really muddy, right? And that's where we as a society have difficult times. Like that was a foul that was not called. Now the outcome is different, but it wasn't supposed to be that way. Yeah. So the reason why, because you look at somebody and it's like, really, did they mail it in? Like, how am I judging the effort of that person? So I never saw somebody that didn't get back up. The problem with it is and this is the part I was never told, is when you fall down for the 5th time, you think about the 3rd and the 4th time and the 1st time that you fell and how bad that hurt. So it never gets isolated as in just this mistake. What happens is all the head trash that you ever had in the past and you've kind of worked through to get to this point, now all starts coming back. And then it starts telling you that maybe you're not good enough. Maybe you're not meant to win. And the part that, and that's why Puke Rally was written, man, is that you just need to overcome this mistake right here. And all the bodies that have been buried in the past, they stay buried. We're not digging them back up. It's just this mistake that you need to deal with. And it has nothing to do with what's happened in the past. It has to do with just what you're doing with right here. But we want to bring all that other baggage onto us. And then that becomes the difficult part. And that's why, in its most simplest terms, that New Year's resolutions fail all the time, is because what happens when we start doing well and then life gets in the way and we miss that workout, bam, now we missed another workout. Then the thought is, see, I can never do it in the past anyway. Why do I even try it now? And we're bringing all that crap that we ever had in the past and we never dealt with, and now we're dealing with it. When all you really have to do is just deal with the next workout, right? The next best thing that you can do. And then that's how winning gets done. And that's why I always felt it was deep. It went a whole lot deeper than just fall down 7, get up 8, because you're dealing with all the past times that you fell down before. And you need to isolate that. You isolate it, now you can win.
Well, I love the way you brought that, because so many people don't think about zooming out. How do I better say this? I love the way you brought it up, because I think it becomes really easy for people to see how they're the aggregate of their past is informing their present and their future. But no wonder, like, and everybody, and I think sometimes therapy gets a bad rap for this, because like, oh, we're just going to keep talking about the same bad stuff in the past. It's like, but what are we doing right now? Like, we're here, let's move forward. I mean, that's a big reason why I love coaching, because a lot of it's like more forward facing,
Yeah.
at least to the, broad strokes to my understanding of things. Dog's yipping at me a little bit, but I think that was really beautiful, because I mean, I feel like there's an interesting blend in there, because understanding and building from your lessons, I'm saying, like, what are the take home lessons you do have to somewhat reflect on? What's some of the constants of growth, and pushing the failure aside and saying, like, what's the nugget I'm going to take out of it and move on? But like, hey, the new failure, it's not selling you your failure as a human being.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. I think of like in football, they always say, throw the interception, short-term memory. A lot of people will have like that little band on their wrist or something that like snap it back into place. I've seen that applied a few times. Wow. That's really cool. I've never heard somebody contextualize it that way. And I think you're right. Like, sport, it really does bring a powerful medium to have this conversation. But if all you're pushing is like, you got to score the next point, like, yes, you do need to score, but are you having the other conversation around of like, how do we integrate the conversation, the mindset work, if we want to call it that, about being, I guess, more well-rounded? Because you're going to have a life when you step off the field or the court or the whatever. Are you carrying the baggage from the court and the field home? Are you carrying it to your other work? If you're like bringing that more holistic model to it, and just like how you said, like, what are the depth of your relationships? How are meaningful are they, like, outside of that? Is that something that changed over time in your career of doing this? Like, how did it? I'm curious to hear how that like grew and matured and developed as like you developed as a professional in this, because I mean, getting exposed to that many people's thoughts has got to be really powerful.
Yeah. It happens when the one thing I'm really good at is just not giving up, right? Like I said, never DNF to race. And that was why like the book got written. Even when 9/11 happened, I mean, our school, like at Temple, didn't, for some reason, when you think about it, it's just the most absurd thing. It never got shut down. Like, it stayed open.
Wow.
Or 9/11, right? We're in Philadelphia. Well, if class was still there, man, like, I'm not going to split. I got to go to class, because I wasn't going to blow it. At that point in my life, I mean, everything was 100% dialed in. And I was one of like two other people that were there. And then all we talked about was like what was going on with the day. But that was just my level of like obsession when it comes to that stuff. Never dropped a class. Fell off an 80-foot cliff like in college, never dropped any of those classes. And it wasn't like it's a conscious thing. It's just like, it's just not the option. It's not the option. And I bring that up because in one of the races that I entered in with a 50K race, it was really, really dangerous situation I was in. Probably mile 24 with 8 more miles, which is not like a 8-mile flat route. I mean, it was 8 miles of a lot of undulation, a lot of climbing, a lot of mud. And I wasn't able to continue. And I can always go into the whole story, but it's like did I ever share this one with you?
No, this isn't the episode that you're referencing that I listened to, is it? No, it's a different one.
No, this is different. Yeah.
Oh yeah, please share. Yeah, I'm curious.
So enter a 50K race. There were about 3 issues that were going on with this. Number one is there was no springtime, right? This race is in May. There was no springtime. It went from winter and training in the 40 degrees to the race day, it's in the 80s. Had a calf injury, and then just didn't we play like we train, and I did not. I was running on flat, and this was all trail, all mud, really, really difficult terrain. And so warning lights start to go off probably at mile 20 of this race. Mile 20 of the race, I stopped by this. And at ultra marathons, like, it's a smorgasbord of everything you want. It's like a tailgate, right, with just alcohol. I'm sure they probably do have alcohol there. They probably do. I think some of them do. But, so I show up at mile 20 and, warning lights are really going off, right? I'm already dehydrated, although I just wasn't quite aware of it. So I just start gorging myself with everything that they have, right? These fig Newtons look good. These pretzels look good. Let's have some of that Coke, some of that Gatorade. How about some more water? Let's wash it down with some Coke. And then, boy, these Twizzlers just look fantastic. Like anything to make me feel better. And now I'm kind of throwing neutral for, those 10, 15 minutes. Like, okay, we can keep going. What didn't get any better? And at mile 24, when I see my family that was waiting for me, everything came up, and it was really projectile stuff. I mean, it was like, exorcist stuff, like scary stuff. Like my kids, under 7 and 5 at the age of time, had no idea what was going on with dad. And as this happens, the sky opens up. I'm puking everywhere. The sky opens up and just starts dumping. I don't mean a sprinkle. I mean just like a torrential downpour where everyone's there at this rest stop, and we all kind of retreat to the car. So I'm in the car. If you can picture, I'm in the back seat. I'm opening up the car, puking, closing the door, looking back at my kids who are just crying, and it's just torrential downpour. So I keep doing that. Not a good spot, And my wife comes back, says, I dropped you from the race. Now, I could not argue with her at this point. I was not in any space where I could be like, yeah. But mind you, remember, I don't drop stuff. Like, we do not quit. So driving back to the cabin, I remember my son saying, you mean daddy had to quit? And we get back to the cabin where he rented. Now it's dry heaves. I kind of pass out. They all leave. They go to lunch. They come back. I wake up, and now the, who are you sort of moment is setting in, right? Like, well, what happened? You never dropped, but you dropped. And that's where then I started to like have some water, started to eat something that kind of stays down. And then I wake my wife up and said, we're going back to finish the race. And I always use this one. I said, we didn't come here to paint. She thought I was kidding at first. She drives me back and check in right where I had dropped off, probably 2.5 hours later. And I end up finishing the race. And I finished the race. I've got my own record now with the slowest race. Like you could walk that whole thing, man, and beat my time. And how the pages go, you got pages of all the finishers. I got my own page. That's how special it is. I got my own page, man, the very last one, but I finished. And that was, we think we're good at never giving up, but until we're in those kind of situations, whatever it takes, we're going to finish. And that was why Puke Rally got written. But that was the part of it, just got, putting yourself in highly stressful environments where you're going to figure out what it is that you got. And I always say this a lot to my athletes is the interesting thing about life is you get the test first, then you get the lesson afterwards. So the race, the game is the test. You get the lesson after that. You don't show up for the very first day of class and get the final exam, right? That would be ridiculous, but that's the way that life works. And so it was from these experiences and putting myself in those kind of situations of them being able to reflect and debrief and what did I learn from this kind of situation and what is it that you're really made of. And boy, a lot of people didn't like that. They said, well, you were in a really bad spot. You probably shouldn't have done it. You know what? I agree with them, but it wasn't in my DNA. I mean, it wasn't in my heart to not finish that race because that's what we came here to do. And it was through those experiences, I think, that the whole philosophy of life evolves and gets better. And that's where, that kind of translates then sort of into the coaching piece as well. Didn't know I didn't share that one with you, man.
No, I'm happy you did right now. That was
Yeah.
what echoed there with me. You do the race first, you get the lesson afterwards. I'll share this aside that relates to this. The way it contextualized for me is I was going to this meditation. I think we talked briefly about the Zazen meditation I was going to. It was like 45-minute sits. And we were talking about sitting and just like
badass, man.
Yeah. I know that's no longer going to be a path for me like that long. I should never say never. And maybe there might be something in there. But I remember there wasn't really much like discussion around it. I was like, this is why we're doing this, this, and this, and this is what you're going to get on the other end. It's like, no, so do this, do this, do this. Okay, now just sit like that and deal with it, and don't move. And as conversations and time went on, it became very apparent of the lesson will show up. You're going to have a moment, and it's going to be different for everybody. And I can attest to that. I think a lot of times we're wanting to know how the end is going to be, and that's not the point. Which my side reflection as you were sharing that was perhaps learning how to ground ourselves and how to setting our intention. If your goal is to just win the race and that's your only indicator of success, to me, what's changed in my life is like, I'm going through this experience, I'm going to learn something. And for whatever reason, I find more external success on the other side. Call it the trophy kind of idea, because the willingness to engage in the process of what does it mean to become better, to improve at a skill set. For you, finishing a 50K, or you said that, is that 100 miles? No,
No, that was 32.
32. So
Yeah.
like, okay, there's a skill set that must be developed, whether it's endurance or strength or whatever, all those things. But like, if you're saying like, I'm going to go learn how to be able to do this, eventually you're going to learn how to do it. Like, you're going to have the skill set to be able to do it. And then if you really enjoyed it and you built, what I would go so far as to say, like, by learning the skill set, you actually have a foundation by which then you can play with the ability to turn up the volume. And by that, I mean the intensity, the speed, the whatever. You can accelerate beyond that. Just, I think so many people don't, all they see is, well, here's the guy who just ripped off 8 championships in a row or whatever, I'm using some extreme examples, but they're not seeing the maybe the decade of building a foundation underneath that,
Right.
to then have a platform to say, cool, now I can play, I can do all this variety, I can do all these other, and I always think of it from a fitness standpoint, like, here's that crazy like exercise they're doing, and they can do it just fine. And they've earned the right to do that because they know how to do it safely, and they can actually control it, and they understand. And they also could decide not to do it because they know how to regulate those things, because there's that concept. I guess where I'm taking this with dealing with failure as part of your identity earlier on is like, hey, I'm going to learn how to do these things. And you've learned how to deal with failure over and over again. So when something as quote unquote extreme as what you dealt with, I mean, compared to somebody else who doesn't necessarily have that volume or that experience underneath their belt, that decision to keep going forward, and like, they wouldn't necessarily have the same wherewithals. And I mean, I'm making a bit of an assumption there, but like, knowing about you a little bit from your history, that is something that I don't think enough people, like, learning how to deal with adversity, whether it's dealing with an F on your report card and having a conversation with it, or getting the feedback that we talked about before. Like, if you're not going to be honest about it and you're not going to learn anything, guess what? You're also not going to, when it's an extreme, you're not going to, I mean, you could have died if you didn't know your own body, like, off by like a percentage of like ability to judge something.
Yeah.
Who knows? And those types of extremes. And most people are not thinking about preparing yourself for, well, let's call it a pandemic. Let's call it a whatever, anything, a bit failure in business. You said, you know, when you shifted in your career, that's a big leap of faith to say, like, I'm going to go figure this out. Like, these are not small things. There's, in business, in relationships, in your health journey, your sports, you're bound to run into, we'll call it a collapse, an economic downturn, a bad sales month, a little bit of friction in your marriage. Maybe your kids are acting up, somebody's sick, somebody dies. How do you going to deal with that, the weight of that experience, if you don't ever dose yourself with a little bit of failure? You don't stress test yourself in some way, shape, and form. I know I took it on a bit of a tangent there myself, which,
Yeah.
not shockingly enough, but like, that's what really came out for me as you're sharing that experience. And man, like, that took a lot of time and a lot of willingness to put yourself in challenging situations to build this, I guess, the adversity muscle to be able to handle something like that and know enough about yourself in that space to be able to make that type of judgment. I thought that was just a really cool, I thought it was a really cool story in and of itself, because
Yeah.
it's not to like say like, hey, everybody, by the way, always finish the race. Cause like, Somebody else might die, but like you specifically know that about yourself because of everything else we discussed of like your training and all the other things that you've gone through in your life. You have the capacity to make a more educated decision and know when
Again,
to die.
don't know if it was that educated. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying mine's the path, but this is what it came down to is I was willing to die in that situation.
Mm.
And I tell my kids that. And I said, look, there's 99% chance I'm not going to die, but there's that chance. That's why we hold all these things with respect and reverence in what you're going to be doing. But nobody does the Iditarod thinking that they're going to die, but there's a big chance that you could.
Yeah.
But that's where I think that's the only edge on life where life really has the meaning to it. And you really appreciate it even more when it does happen. But then you get the growth when it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's the part of, I think you have to be willing to put yourself out there for those type of risks in order to get that ultimate prize, which is appreciation for the process and the growth when it's not going to happen. It comes easy to you. How much joy really is there to it?
Almost none, because you can't differentiate.
Yeah.
Which leads me to, like, you brought up death. And that leads into our conversation, whether this fascination you have with time and that being, and we'll call it scarcity, like it's going to go away at some point. And the inspiration for the new book you're writing, I can't wait to be patient. Take me a little bit on that, if you're, and as much as you're able to share right now. I know it's still in the process, not done, or maybe not even started, like, but you're like gathering some information a little bit.
It's writing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's writing. I mean, it's back to 1 hour every day.
Yeah.
But not every day. So it's probably a few days a week right now, but it's getting there. Yeah, man, I can't wait to be patient. The biggest struggle is, and this came when, again, you're training for an ultra marathon or 100 miler, you're out there a lot by yourself and there's a lot of time to think. And I never listen to any music when I'm running. My thoughts keep me going enough. And it just kind of dawned on me. It means, like, I did 16 different training runs over a marathon distance in order to prep for like this race that, you have 30 hours to do it. Well, did those runs not mean anything? Was it all just for prepping for the race? And it's like, you have these moments of clarity where it's like, no, this has something to it, right? Being out here has something to it. Running with my dog in the, when it's dark out, watching the sunrise is the trophy in itself. When you get done with a really, really tough run and you have a reservoir right there that you can get to jump into, and you brought your soap and you can just, backwoods it, that right there, man, is the process. Like, but that is the trophy. So the reason why I bring that up, because it's like, the only thing we ever focus on is just the result and what it is that we want: results, statistics, and performance. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like staring at the sun, right? You can't stare at the sun long, but that's all we want to stare at. When you hear the process, we talk about the process, but do we focus on the process? Like, do we actually go into a really tough workout, a really tough situation saying, look, this is the reward in itself, being able to do it, being able to run this hill is the reward in itself. And when you take that approach, it just allows a lot more freedom to, experience it, to be part of it, and to not put so much damn pressure on yourself that you have to win this one too, because then it just becomes, a roller coaster of winning, losing, winning, losing, winning, losing. And if you can just focus on that process. So I can't wait to be patient came out of that. And the thing, because what happens, and more so than anything, is, all right, man, you got the result that you wanted. You got the payday. You got the race result. You lifted the weight. Now what? It's always now what, even in our own mind, or what's next. People that fly back with a gold medal from the Olympics that think, boy, I thought it'd feel different. Or, okay, now what? And they get stuck. They can get stuck there for the rest of their life, right? Because they won the gold medal. There's no better feeling than that. But life keeps going on. Media, no matter what, no matter who wins the championship, wants to add on there. Hey, well, what about next year? Can they repeat it? And I post this all the time. Anybody that follows me on social media, I'm posting all the time. Even when you're the best, you're not the best for very long. Media wants, the game isn't even over, man. And they're talking about, hey, can they repeat it? You know what I'm saying? Like they haven't even left the building and it's already like, hey, well, what about next year? Or where do we rank them in terms of the best of all time? Because we need to do that for, like it matters. But so once that happens, it's now what, or what's next? And I just think there's emptiness to that. I think that's where it becomes kind of sad. And I struggle with it big time, man. You get to the top of the mountain, you want to enjoy that mountain. How long are people really on top of Mount Everest enjoying it? 5-10 minutes at most. You got to get back down. Well, that's the same thing with life, man. Nothing lives up on the mountaintop. And you look at any mountaintop we're staring at, nothing lives up there. They can't live up there. You have to come back down. So it just gets back to, look, the process is really what it's about. And to be able to stop and Ferris Bueller it, right? Like stop and smell it, man, because life moves pretty damn fast. So you have to be able to enjoy that process. And that's what I can't wait to be patient, man, is all about, like the working on that muscle, but being able to focus on that process. And that is the reward, like in itself. Because Barry Zito, Cy Young winner, told me this one. He just said, results are for other people. It's really true, man. Wow. Process is what's for us, and it's what's in our control, and it's our constants. And it doesn't have to do with anything else other than what we're trying to do. And that's where the fun part, and that's where the flow and the freedom lies.
I love that perspective, and the things that came out like immediately jumped out to me are, one, the reflection that you're posing of just shifting this as opposed to staring into the sun, is that I feel like there's so much more gratitude at arriving at every moment. So a lot more joy, a lot more like connection to what you're in, like the moment that you're in, as opposed to be like, I'm living in the future of when I'm standing on the trophy with the trophy and all that stuff on the podium. But I also think what it allows itself for is a reflection of like, well, what if I didn't have this right now? What if I couldn't? What if I broke my leg? Nobody thinks about it. It's like, well, if you broke your leg, and like right now, if your leg was broken, you'd be doing anything to be schlepping it up this hill or doing, wherever you're going to be. Or if somebody died, like you'd give anything to just be able to share a conversation, or have a bite to eat, or, just get a hug. Like, those are the things that we easily take for granted, and we get lost in that gratitude. But that you're bringing to the table here is that the process is the reward. Like almost everything you're doing is winning. And again, if you're feeling like you're winning every time you show up, you're probably going to show up more often, show up enough times. Usually you get better. You get better enough.
Right.
As opposed to somebody who's like, now what? It's like, well, I don't know. Do I have the willingness or the desire to just go through this again? I don't know. What an interesting trade-off there. It's, wow. Well, I'm really excited for when that, obviously I got to continue to read Puke and Rally, but I think it's really like bigger metaphors for life within such a thought like that, because life is more of an endurance race than anything else.
Oh, for sure, man.
Hoping it's more of a quality experience than just a quantity experience. It's, at least that's the way I look for it.
And it doesn't, and so people that are listening, like, it's not a very laissez-faire sort of approach of, it's about showing up just with a different headspace. It's about showing up with your heart. It's about showing up with an intensity, and it's about showing up with a commitment in what you're doing. And in the same sentence, in the same breath, man, being able to focus on that breath, and being able to focus on the scenery, being able to focus on the relationships, the bus rides, and not being in such a damn hurry to get to the race or where that's going to be, And that's where too often we focus on that. And when we always go back to our baseline, whatever our baseline was. You get a new pair of shoes. I love a new pair of shoes, man. I love it. It's just one of the best feelings of getting a new pair of shoes. I don't have that feeling right now because I haven't had a new pair of shoes in, a month. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That feeling wears off no matter what it is, man. The gold medal, the ring, the pats on the back, the big check, it wears off. And then you always go back to who you are and your baseline level. And that's just physics, right? Regression of the mean, man. We're always going back to the mean. Or maybe it's algebra.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're going to have the mean in physics. I guess you got to use some algebra with it, physics. I just love this conversation, my friend. And it's so cool that you're bringing that type of depth to just like the people you're working with. Because again, I think like high performers in any field grapple with interesting things, and just like this holistic approach that you're bringing to the table, I think stands to not only help somebody in the immediate, but also, again, we're talking like sport. People transition from from sport as a profession to another, like the rest of their life, or like transitioning just like within their day to day, like going from sport to family to self-care to whatever those things are. Like I see that bigger picture zooming out, thing of having a greater sense of self and a greater sense of like, who am I as a person? As you said, bringing it back to the mean, I think what a powerful perspective that brings to the table, because it allows you to integrate yourself wherever you go in a healthy way, in a way that is authentic and true and honest to who you are. Obviously, just with a different shade of like, okay, this is how I bring that to the table in my family. This is how I bring that to the table in my profession or my job or with my clients or with whomever. I think there's just so much that can be taken from that alone. So it's so cool to hear that you're helping people in such a way, because I think we need more of it. But at the end of the day, knowing thyself is such a profound thing because of everything we just talked about, and your ability to know who you are in the face of adversity. I think it gives us more confidence to get through just that space, because it's going to be just a moment, so long as it's not the last moment, but like it's going to be just a moment in the blink of an eye. So yeah, I just love it, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man.
Any other thoughts you want to share with people today?
No, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot. I'll say no.
Yeah, we did.
I'll say no, and then I'll add one more thing. It's the thing about media that cracks me up so much is I kind of watch it. It's when they talk about the legacy of somebody, like we're still talking about the legacy of some of the best, and like, we're going to add in that, but their legacy is solidified. Their legacy is complete. And it's kind of funny, right? Because it's like, well, they didn't die. Like the legacy is going to be kind of whatever you think it's going to be, but it's like, I just need to add this, is they don't boo nobodies. And what I mean by that is whoever is getting talked about means that they've done something. And I think you need to be booed, need to be told you're not good enough, that you can't do it, because only then are you really going to decide, are you going to listen to that negative voice, or are you going to listen to yourself? Every successful person that I've come across, Caleb, was told that at some point, either through their circumstance or by somebody else. And that somebody else sometimes was close to them, but they said, you're not going to amount to anything, or you're not going to make it. There's just no way you can do that. And people turn it into what was proving them wrong. And I think there's always some of that, but I think it was proving themselves right more than anything. And it's that piece of, it's really a blessing when you get told that you're not good enough. You have to be able to absorb it like that and be able to take it. And because it's a fish or cut bait moment, man. You can't be in the middle of being told you're not good enough. You're going to listen to that voice, or you're going to listen to yourself.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And my hope that anybody listening to this is going to go like, my hope is that they have the courage to say, I'm going to listen to, like, I can keep going. I've got my, like, I mean, you said it, like, they don't boo nobody's like, sometimes it might even be a sign of success. The
Oh,
fact that you're
absolutely.
starting to get, I'm laughing a little bit in my head right now because like 2 days ago, I was just sharing this. I had somebody from, I don't even know who this person is. They were trash talking me. I had no idea. I had no idea. This is from like
Good.
fitness days. I'm like, and I always laugh because every time I've ever had that, like once I learned like, oh, this is just kind of part of growth. It means you
Yeah.
had to have done something. You had to have had an opinion that maybe rubs up against some people's sensitivities. And that might just be their stuff. But if you're honest and you're courageous enough to go out there, like, of course you're going to get critique. It's natural. It's part of the gig. But it also opens a new conversation that I think is really can be very powerful for a lot of people too. So yeah, I really appreciate bringing that up because I think most people get sidetracked by the first time somebody just says like, I don't think you can do it. I don't believe in you. I was like, okay, well, that's one person out of 8 billion people on the planet. Like, come on.
Yeah.
That's not the only
And,
thing.
and that's where I'm getting back to. It's like, you listen to the media as a comedy because they have an agenda as well.
Mm.
And their agenda is to get you to watch, their agenda is to get you to listen. That's about it. And that's where I think of, like people don't see things as they are. They see them as they are. What is that they want to bring into the conversation or their viewpoint? I think that's always important.
I love it, my friend. Rob, I'm just so grateful for you sharing some time with me today. Like
Thank you, buddy.
if somebody's listening, they're like, I love what he's got to say. I want more of him. How do I get more in touch with this guy? How do I connect? How can I get his access to his books? Like, what's the best way for somebody to connect with you more?
Yeah, man. I think obviously like social media, pretty easy to find on that, but the website's drrobbell.com or pukeandrallybook.com, man. Those are two easy ways.
Beautiful. I love
Yeah,
it.
thanks for having me, bud.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I'm going to share all that in the show notes. So guys, please make sure you go check that out. Thank you again for sharing your time today, your wisdom, your insight. I'm just deeply grateful for anybody who's willing to share some time with me. And I'm excited to continue to grow our friendship. So thank you again. Everybody go check out all the website, check out the show notes. All the good stuff is there. And I remind you, until next time, love everybody.